I'm very happy to see that a whole bunch of people have made it across many time zones. So this session is very relevant to the EPIC Air Quality Award, where we're deploying largish networks of low-cost air quality monitors primarily. And so I've been doing this in Pakistan since 2016. And one question that always arises for me is that how many monitors do you need in a particular location? And that being said, where should you place those monitors? And there exists no good science or no good methodology on navigating this. So, if Mahad, if you could please share our screen, and then I'll kind of show you the background with a bit of literature review about how we are doing this. So you can see in the next slide. Um, is that I mean, firstly, in our regions, right? Like we're mostly all from the global south, and we're all coming from cities and countries where there is practically no air quality monitoring infrastructure. We know it's very critical to get air quality data, not just for the data alone, and not just to be able to know about pollution episodes and pollution spikes, but also to inform research around health, and also to make policy decisions about, like in the case of Lahore in Pakistan, where schools are shut down during high air quality days. We, of course, cannot just deploy a very expensive reference monitoring network because, I mean, our countries have limited budgets and these monitors cost a lot. So, but I will frame the discussion more around how regulatory grade networks are designed first, because there's also no end to how many monitors you can have when it comes to these low-cost monitoring networks, right? Like there is, Mahad, next slide. There's this concept of hyper-local monitoring, where you want to have a monitor in every neighborhood, and in every 1 kilometer or 100 meters. So, but let's start with like having what is the minimum number of monitors, and what is the not just the minimum but also the optimum number. So here also we start firstly with an opinion, is that this air quality monitoring data is, again, not just about the data, it's about its health impacts on the population. So you want to have population data as the primary input for any air quality monitoring location and any network designed. And then within these high population areas, where exactly do you place those monitors? Next slide. So, and before we jump into that, let's talk about like existing regulatory standards, right? Because that's where we are starting from. So, the US EPA often considered the gold standard for monitoring methodologies in terms of the technical depth of their monitoring network. But how do they define the minimum number of monitors that you need to have? And their definition, this is for PM 2.5, is quite straightforward, that for every, if you have more than 1 million people, you should have 3 monitors; from 500,000 to 1 million, 2 monitors; and from 500,000 to 500,000, 1 monitor. But they also add that if the monitoring, if the existing data shows that 85% of the days exceed the US national ambient air quality standards, then you need so many monitors. And if you're within 85% of that standard, you can reduce the number of monitors, going down to even 0. And there are different tables defined for different pollutants. So one big thing over here is that you're always requiring historical pollution data to be able to even have a starting point. In the next slide, we see that the European Union follows a similar approach, where it is also based on a population agglomeration, that if you have roughly, if I just look at the last figure of 3.75 million, where they say you should have one monitor per 750,000 people in that area. So if it's a big city of, say, 4 million people, you need 5 monitors. If it's 4.5 million, it becomes 6 monitors, and so forth. But similarly, this is to start with, you need to also have air pollution levels, and they're known to be high. If the pollution levels are low, you're not supposed to have monitors at all as far as regulatory network design goes. And it's a similar story in India and many other countries where you need historical data to be able to decide the number of monitors. It doesn't end there. In the next slide, there are other, let's say, non-regulatory but scientific methodologies that you can use. Here I mentioned 3 of them, and similarly, hello? Okay, so somebody's not on mute. Please mute yourself. So similarly, all these existing methodologies, like the first one requires an existing monitoring network. The second one, which works on modeling, needs a lot of data inputs. So it needs pollution data, emissions inventory, topographical data, meteorological data, and as well as the last one, which is about land use characteristics. So we're talking about us, not having access to a lot of these data sets. And even if we do have access, it's very difficult for us to put them together. And computationally very expensive to run and process and to understand. Like, there are a lot of decisions that have to happen at every step in the shape of the input data, in the modeling methodologies, and so forth. So all of these approaches are kind of black boxes. And we tried a number of different approaches in our environment first before we, I guess I would say, thanks to Mahad, he will be taking over shortly. We stumbled upon this very elegant approach in the next slide. So let's skip this one. One more slide ahead, please. Yeah, last thing to be added is this is an example from the US that population density is always associated with population exposure. So you have even if there's lower air pollution levels, but because it is more dense, it is exposure that counts. So in the next slide, we jump into our methodology, where Mahad will now be taking over and explaining to you that why, with a bit of a background of how we're utilizing this population data. Mahad, if you may now take over.
Yes, hello everybody. So I'm Mahad. I'm the data scientist at PAQI, and I have, like Abid said, we stumbled upon this methodology to build a resource efficient monitoring network that requires that elegantly solves this problem of choosing monitoring locations. So this methodology primarily utilizes the weighted k-means approach, which basically assigns a weight to each data point, and each data point here is the latitudinal and longitudinal coordinate. Yeah. So the point is that the centroid, the location is basically shifted towards the data point that is highly populated. It basically solves the it basically creates an equitable monitoring network. So here in this animation, you can see how the centroid starts with a random location, and then it shifts itself towards the most populous area. And most populous area here is highlighted with the bigger circle in this animation. It also yeah, skip this. Yeah. So here the problem with the Python library of the standard k-means algorithm was that it uses Euclidean distance to optimize itself. Meanwhile, we are dealing with geo coordinates, that's basically latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates. And we had to sort of develop a methodology that uses Haber-Sign formula, which is used for spherical surfaces such as the Earth. And here the steps are as follows. We first acquire data from high resolution data from satellite data from sources such as WorldPop, which offers open source population data. Then we define an airshed of high resolution, which is basically 0.01 by 0.01 degrees, which in kilometers is 1 by 1 kilometer. And we compute the zonal statistics. The zonal statistics are basically the sum of population in each high resolution grid cell for our defined air set. So yeah, and we assign latitudinal and longitudinal coordinates to each grid cell as well. And then we set a benchmark and define low density areas and high density areas. Low density areas are the ones that have population less than 5,000 people per square kilometer. And we visualize those results. And finally, we apply the weighted k-means, our algorithm. And we by defining the number of predefining the number of monitors in each population zone. That is that's not the, as Abid was talking about, that there's no figure of to or a way to determine the optimal number of monitors here, but through visualization and through through self-defined metrics, uh, we can see that how representative the air quality monitoring network is that the algorithm suggests. And finally, another problem that we faced was that when we define when we define the monitoring network in low density areas and high density areas, there may be um, some overlap between the monitors in those areas. So what we do is that we define a threshold, for example, 1 kilometer. So uh, monitors within 1 kilometer radius of each other would be merged to the average coordinate of to the average coordinates. Yeah, so that basically very elegantly solves the problem of those very close monitors. So here you can see the results for Lahore. In green, you can see the suggested monitoring locations, and in yellow, you can see the already deployed monitors. As you can see that the yellow monitors are extremely concentrated within the urban airshed, and there's really no monitoring in the low density areas, which doesn't make air quality monitoring equitable for the entire population in the airshed. Yeah, so Lahore has a population of 15.9 million, and after several hit and trial runs, we decided that the optimal number of monitors in low density areas should be 25 and 20 in high density areas. So
So,
population.
let me step in and just add something here because this is a nice visualization which applies to any city where the darker colors are, you can imagine it's the city center, and you can see these branches running off it, which are essentially highways leading to other dense areas. And so even the system, this methodology has suggested that even the low density areas should still be focused on where the population is. Like towards the top left, for example, you can see a bit of a darker gray patch, and right in the center is the monitoring location. And in addition, what's important is that the old network, or like typical networks that tend to happen, which are just within the dense areas, like within really the urban city, these yellow dots, You're missing out on getting what's called background air quality levels, which gives you a much better representation of what the air quality would be without these very specific and localized sources that you have in the denser areas. And these are like, I mean, things that even we did not think of, that, oh, this is how we should do it. And, even the background monitors that we had planned were still pretty much in the urban core. So this approach where you define an airshed and let this algorithm come up with a suggestion for you is, and we at the moment using only one data source. It's a lot more representative of the airshed as a whole, rather than an ad hoc decision of where air quality monitors should be. So, Mahad, back to you.
Here we can also see the clusters that the algorithm has suggested. So we have 25 low density, sorry, I'll just have some more. Yeah, so we have 20 high density clusters and 25 low density clusters here. And the shapes you can see how like on the top left there was a high density mark over there. So it's uh, fetched that location and placed a monitor over there. Uh, we have results for some other cities as well. We have Dhaka and Lagos. So in Lagos, it was interesting that on IQ Air, there was only one monitoring location that was showing the already deployed monitor over there. However, our algorithm suggests about 13 low density monitors and 14 high density monitors in order to have an equitable monitoring network. Similarly, in Dhaka, it's a highly populated area with 21.9 million people, and the airshed is also pretty large. It's 53 by 51 kilometers. We have around 500,000 people per monitor, according to our suggested um, algorithm. Yeah. So this slide is basically about why our algorithm is suitable for different geographies. And basically, it only requires a single data input, and that is in the form of population raster file, which is open source and available for each country on WorldPop, of course. You can predefine the airshed according to your own requirements, and you will have the results because the algorithm is geography neutral. However, there are some limitations to our methodology, like any other scientific approach. The accuracy of satellite data is still questionable in the form that WorldPop. There was this recent study that mentioned that WorldPop has an accuracy of 56%. It's relatively better than other sources, but it's still a limitation for our for the perfect monitoring network. And there's also this problem of validating our uh, monitoring design because there's no true labels to uh, check the suggested sites against the actual sites. However, we can define some statistical measures and compare our results with existing monitors for example, cities in the US. Right. So we are also working on building a user-friendly interface that allows users to define their own airshed and upload the population files that are available on WorldPop. You can configure the network and define the number of monitors in low and high density areas, and also state the minimum distance that there should be between the monitors, and you just click on the button and you will have the results within seconds. You can also download those locations and maybe check against your own designed network of monitors. Yes. So when I was working on these slides, I checked the AQA, the awardees background, and there was in the global south, and there were awardees from Nepal. So from Kathmandu, there has in Kathmandu, someone has been granted uh, 40 monitors in Kathmandu. So we ran the analysis for Kathmandu, and here we have the optimal locations for placing those monitors. So if someone's from Kathmandu, I'd be happy to talk to them after this presentation ends. Here's from Kampala. I remember receiving a message on the WhatsApp group as well. So I reran the analysis again for Kampala, and here we have the optimal locations. You can see that uh, it very nicely picks up the municipalities in Wakiso and Kira, if I'm not pronouncing it wrong. And here we have for Zomba, Malawi. So the thing with Malawi is that it's a relatively low dense airshed. So 20 monitors here would be widely spread because the population in Zomba is not concentrated much at let's say an urban center like Lahore. So yeah.
So if we just go back one slide. So like we were talking about how applying it to one city, but you can also apply like to a whole country. So you can and even across that country, right? Like you're automatically identifying, okay, like these are the population centers, and accordingly you're able to like come up with a thing. So I mean, I'd love to hear what the plan is for Zomba. Otherwise, like were you considering to deploy monitors only within a city, or what was the plan in your mind? And does this map that you can see here, we haven't put the population density so that it's easier to see the names of the place. Is this matching with what you had imagined? And I think with that, we can go into any discussion or questions that people might have.